You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Welcome to Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. Each week, we'll take a deep dive into the world of volatility with in-depth analysis, trading activity reviews, strategy breakdowns, cutting-edge education, and much more. We'll also bring you exclusive conversations with the traders, researchers, and asset managers who are reshaping the volatility landscape. If it involves volatility, then you'll find it on Volatility Views. Volatility Views is brought to you by Nasdaq. From its inception, Nasdaq has been an innovator and agent of change in the financial markets. It's in our DNA. From the development of electronic trading to our drive to bring enhanced functionality and world-leading technology to our suite of 6 options exchanges, we aim to exemplify customer focus, consistent technology, and streamlined solutions. In 2019, Nasdaq proudly launched the Nasdaq 100 Volatility Index, ticker symbol VOLQ, to its suite of exchange indexes. The VOLQ index uses only at-the-money options, offering the investment world a measure of volatility that directly points to the Nasdaq 100. Since then, CME launched VOLQ Futures, VLQ, and we've launched Nasdaq 100 Volatility Index Options, ticker symbol VOLQ, which are AM-settled index options on the VLOQ index that provide investors with a new way to gauge forward-looking equity market swings. Learn more about these exciting new volatility products at www.nasdaq.com/VLOQ. You can find more on Nasdaq's full suite of index options products at www.nasdaq-100-options-xnd-nqx-ndx-VOLQ. Nasdaq, leading the U.S. options market and continually rewriting tomorrow. And now it's time for a deep dive into the world of volatility. It's time for Volatility Views.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back here one final time here on the on-demand side for Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. My name, of course, Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as from the ever-engaging, at least we tend to think so around these parts, Options Insider Radio Network. I want to thank all of you who've joined us throughout the week on all the on-demand fun Volatility Views, of course, the final on-demand show for the week. If you do want more quality content in your lives, and hey, who doesn't? You want the party to continue beyond the close of Volatility Views today, then head on over to theoptionsinsider.com/pro. We got not one, but 2 pro Q&A paloozas coming at you. Well, actually a pro Q&A, and then, of course, options oddities right after Volatility Views as well. So 2 more shows coming at you. You can check that out, of course, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. And, of course, wherever you're listening to Volatility Views on the on-demand side, it's on just about every platform under the sun these days. If you like what you hear, do throw some stars our way. This show's been running for over a decade. It's got a long track record. But as we saw just last month, a new record in the world of options, 1.1 billion, yes, billion with the B, contracts going up. So new people discovering and trading options all the time. They need a place to turn on the content side. So if you like what you hear, do throw some stars. Could be in the Vol Views feed, could be in the network feed, could be wherever you get our mobile app. All those places work. Help people discover the content at the end of the day. And clearly there are more people who need some help these days. So those stars help point them in our direction. And let's see who's joining us on the old Vol Views program today. First, let's go out to the Southern Volatility Mecca known as Austin, soon to be home to this year's RMC conference, where we are joined once again by the greasiest of meatballs, Mr. Mark Sebastian from OptionPit.com. Mr. Meatball, welcome back to the show, sir. Feels like I haven't talked to you in ages.
I know, it does. I haven't talked to you all the way since Monday. It's crazy.
Wasn't Andrew on Monday? So it wasn't Monday.
Oh, you're right. It has been a while, hasn't it?
It's been like 7 years. It's been crazy.
Good to chat with you, Mark. I'm excited to be here. Lots to talk about on this paint dry of a day.
You'll be happy to know Andrew did his best college try on the 80s wrestling, but alas, he did not pull through on the trivia this week.
He never does.
Once in a while, he surprises us. Those are few and far between. And then joining us today on the old Nasdaq hot seat. First off, the streak was broken last week, but he's back to kick it back into life. He is Mr. Kevin Davitt, the head of Nasdaq Index Options Content. Kevin, welcome back to Volatility Views, sir.
Thank you for having me back. The streak was broken because I attended a travel baseball tournament outside of Indianapolis, and what I observed there is a boom going on around Indy, and like nothing is older than 5 years.
Those kids, they'll break your hearts, they'll break your streaks at the end of the day. You know, the kids, they're responsible for everything.
That's true.
At the end of the day. And then also joining us, another twofer in the Nasdaq hot seat this week. We have another newcomer to the show and indeed to the network. He is Jermal Chandler, the senior options strategist for tastylive. Jermal, welcome to Volatility Views.
Hey, thanks for having me. I mean, honestly, I'm surprised you guys let just about anybody in the building. I really appreciate it.
Our standards are pretty low. At this point, I blame Kevin. He's just letting anybody walk through the door here. But Jermal, before we dive into the show proper, as we are wont to do with all of our first timers here on the network, why don't you go ahead and give our audience a bit of an overview of your background in the options and indeed volatility realms, as well as what it is you do over there at tastylive.
Well, thanks. First of all, I have an interesting background to some degree. Just to keep it brief, I was doing science and research for about 10 to 15 years before I even started trading options. And I started in 2006. I worked at a prop trading firm in Chicago, Peak 6 Investments, for those who know about that. And I had a little stint in a couple of different places in the industry. Not long after that, I traded on my own for about 2 years after that. And then I worked at FINRA for about a year. And then I honestly was at a crossroads. I was either going to come back into the industry or go back into some kind of fool people that I was into an engineer, but I ended up coming back into the industry. I worked at the CBOE Exchange for about 3 years, started in their reg department, which is always interesting when you come from trading to go into reg. And then not long after that, I ended up teaming up with my good friend here on the show, Kevin Davitt, at the Options Institute. And after leaving there, I'm at tastylive now. So I'm on a live show day in and day out. I do a show that's kind of a play on my background, which is called Engineering the Trade. Do that 1:45 to 2:15 p.m. Central Time, just about every day except for Wednesday. And a couple of other things I do at the network. I'm on a Futures Power Hour show from noon to 1 p.m. Central Time, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then I got a Friday morning segment with our top dogs, Tom Sosnoff and Tony Batista, which everybody seems to know. So that's a little bit about me.
Former regulator. All right, we'll have to watch what we say, Jermal, for the rest of the show as we keep on rolling right on into the volatility review.
It's time to break down the latest developments in the volatility trading world. It's time for the Volatility Review.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Volatility Review, the portion of the show where we break down the week that was and indeed still is from a vol trade and trend and analysis and all sorts of fun perspectives. And coming into the start of the show, it's one of those days where you don't know where the hell the market's going. Just wait 2 minutes and it'll be somewhere very different. Is it green? Is it red? Is it green? Is it red? It's one of those days, listeners. We're flirting around unched pretty much all morning here as it stands right now. S&P off slightly, Nasdaq up slightly. Most of them less than 0.05%. So we're talking about a pretty much unched day here to end the week. So we've been talking about this for a while, kind of all week long. We have this script, it seems to set in for most of the days this week, where the market starts off and, they try to hit it, they try to crush it. Usually they drive it down to about where we are now, right around 41.30. And then the bulls kick in and they bid it back up to around 41.5. And that's been the script we played out most of this week. Today we're just hanging out around 41.30 for the most part. So one of those days where it does seem like we're maybe watching a little bit of paint dry. And that's happening, listeners. And you're heading into a weekend. We are going to see vol come back in, and VIX once again back at a 16 handle, listeners. Yeah, we're looking at some impressive lows here for volatility. It's been a while since we've seen a 16 handle in ye old VIX cash. A 1690 when we kicked off the show. That puts it down about exactly a point from where we were this time last week. VVIX, the vol of vol. This is what's fascinating to me. We have a ever eroding VIX 16 handle and a VVIX threatening triple digits, 99, when we kicked off the show. Up a whopping 13 points from this time last week. So that's a fairly rarefied air. You don't see that happening too often. In fact, we looked it up yesterday on our Option Block show, and the last time we were even remotely in this range was early July of 2021. Listen, I think it was July 2nd. And we were at about a 15 handle in VIX, 1507, I believe, and VVIX was around a 106. And that was the last time that we really kissed this, even close to this level in VIX. And also, as it happened, VVIX happened to be around that same level. So you got to go back nearly 2 years to find a similar vol environment. And even then, there were a lot of other things that were very different. So fairly interesting times we're all living in, even if the volume today, not exactly blowing the doors off. VOLQ 1990 when we kicked off the show. VOLQ, of course, the at-the-money vol of the Nasdaq. No skew here, just the facts, ma'am. Down about 1 1/3 points from where it was this time last week. Let's go around the horn the opposite of the way we started. Let's go out to the Nasdaq hot seat first. Jermal, as our guest, we'll start with you, sir. What is catching your eye and lighting up your tape in the world of volatility this week?
Funny you mentioned that. Actually, I'll start with the VVIX since you brought that up. That's actually something I noticed yesterday. We saw a nice little pop in VVIX, and I like to watch the VVIX divided by VIX sort of metric. It's always interesting, right? Because on average, if you look over about a 5-year period, that thing averages about 5, and lows, if it gets down to 2, which we saw during the pandemic, that's how high vol is overall. And the higher this thing goes, you're looking at complacency. So it's kind of interesting to see this thing peaking at 6 right now after that big move yesterday. Of course, since VVIX is on top, that's one of the reasons why we saw the big move. But it's a really interesting thing as of right now, right? Like just to see all of that happen. And obviously, there's probably a ton of options that's been trading in VVIX trading in VIX throughout this week. We saw over 1 million for Tuesday and Wednesday, not so much for yesterday. So paying attention to that, but also obviously, God, 1 month SPX realized vol. Wow.
Terrible. In the toilet.
You know what I mean? Like, wow. We haven't seen that in like just about 2 years as well. So those are the two things I'm watching. Other than that, we just got no vol right now, boys. That's just what it is.
A lot of discussion as what is driving VVIX to such lofty heights. The obvious suppositions that it's a little bit more juice lurking out there in the downside on the put side. Is that your supposition as well, Jermal? That's what's driving VVIX to these lofty heights?
Yep, pretty much. That's clearly the situation right now. And look, I don't know I'm actually not that surprised. We just had, obviously the SVB event that basically drove vol up to 30. But once things calmed down, we threw a Fed facility at it, basically, and there's no more banks that have failed since. And everybody's like, well, hey, Russia hasn't bombed anybody in a while, and this is going on with SVB, and those are fine. There's no other banks going to fail. And you know what? We kind of have an idea on we kind of have a handle now on what the Fed's going to do as far as rates. So why should vol be high?
No reason at all.
This guy's got a handle on what he's talking about here, right? He might be a rookie, but he's got a handle on this landscape.
Yeah, you mentioned realized vol out in the S, and you're right. I was just looking at it while you were talking, and I happened to just pull it up. And literally everything right now in the SPX. 30-day implied, 30-day realized, 60-day realized, 120-day realized. They're all in the first percentile right now.
Wow.
So we're at just extremely rarefied air right now when it comes to the vol landscape. Kevin, you were off last week, so you may be a little bit rusty. So shake off that rust, sir. What's catching your eye out there in the world of vol this week?
I got it. It's shaking off. As I kind of tend to do on this show and in general, I take a bit of a broader perspective, and I'm going to elaborate on points you've already made so far and Jermal made. One, I think that ratio that you look at, Jermal, is an interesting one. Big picture, it's interesting that the S&Ps and the Nasdaq 100 are pretty much in the middle of their 2-year range. This is a do-nothing market, but from my perspective, that potentially presents different or unique trading strategies relative to the past couple of years. You pointed out the return of VVIX. I think related to that, you see more emphasis on skew. So that downside relative to the upside in index options. There was a very pronounced move in VVIX early this week. It was especially big relative to the change in VIX. But bigger picture, I don't make a whole lot of fuss about these shifts because when you see realized volatility measures like you just mentioned, in that 1% relative to history moving toward lows and equity markets grinding higher, it's fairly typical to see VVIX increase and skew increase. That's kind of normal option behavior. Again, this big picture question, I think, or the real question is, are we in a bull market? Or is this a long bear market rally like we kind of saw back in 2000 for us olds? My answer would be maybe so, maybe not. And that's both from a compliance standpoint and from a real world standpoint. From the maybe so perspective, the MOVE index, which I come on here and talk about from time to time, has come in about 50 handles or 33% from that SVB implosion a month ago. And maybe once we figure out this debt ceiling issue, it's all clear. This has been a rates-centric sell-off. Markets were caught off sides by both the speed and magnitude of the move last year, and maybe it's been digested now. On the flip side, or the maybe not argument, we're at the tail end of a historic period in terms of length for low rates. They were low for a decade. Rate changes like we've seen take a long time to move through the system to influence behavior, and it's possible we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. Like, is housing going to slow to a crawl? Will other commercial banks fail? Will inflation be stickier than anticipated? And then what if the Fed keeps rates at the ballpark of 5% for a while? Can we continue to rally if the Fed maintains and doesn't pivot later this year? I do not know, but that's why I continue to play this game.
What a great game it is. Mr. Meatball, you said you were also amazed at the vol of vol as well as just the anemic vol out there in the S. What is catching your eye out there this week, sir?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I like that we brought up the VVIX in that as the VIX is hitting new lows, as realized volatility is dying, they are just absolutely assaulting VIX call options that are longer dated. There has been a just heavy amount of buying. It's notably on Tuesday and Wednesday. But we saw pretty heavy volume Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Not as heavy as Tuesday and Wednesday, but still pretty heavy. Most of it calls going out to like September. A little bit of June action as well. And, that was one of the things that I think kicked off VVIX getting this pop. Toward the end of the day, we saw a trader come in and really put his foot down on vol with a pretty decent sized delta neutral call purchase, and that I think kind of kicked off this VVIX pop.
Let's keep rolling out there into the land of the volatility surface as we kicked off the show, listeners. Obviously, April rolling off the board. since our last show. So May now slotting into that pole position there, that front position. Still down, of course, from where it was this time last week, right about 0.75 of a point. June down only about 0.25 of a point. So we're not seeing the pure annihilation of the front portion of that curve as we have in the past, which does make sense. We already are starting to tilt at some interesting low levels here. How much more juice do you want them to suck out, at least over the span of a week, especially in a week when we were putting up some numbers, at least on the volume front earlier this week. Jermal, you mentioned when you're not talking to us, you're out there hosting a futures show. So I have to imagine you pay a wee bit of attention to the volatility surface. What's catching your eye out there in the realm of VIX futures this week, sir?
Yeah, 100%. The funny thing is actually the show that we host is hosted by one exchange, but we do talk about stuff from both exchanges. So you talk about the vol surface. I mean, like you said, looking at that term structure, look, there's a $2 difference between May and June right now, which is fairly interesting. And then another $1 between June and July. So strong contango to some degree, right? I mean, as of right now. And again, it shows you market's not really worried about anything. And then when you look across different expirations on whether it's, SPY, whether it's Qs, whether it's SPX, whether it's Nasdaq, you're seeing basically low vol for several months, several expirations. I mean, not for a while. And even, I know we're talking, we try to sort of bring to the forefront some of the things that we can expect coming up. I honestly I refuse to talk about the debt ceiling situation yet. I very well remember in 2011, I definitely got caught the wrong way on part of it. Maybe that has something to do with it, but I digress. It is out there. It is expected, but I wonder how much it's actually going to factor into what's going on. Obviously, you can see when you look at CDS rates, you can see that there is a blip out there, right? Like there is something going on, but I just wonder how much it's going to come into play with options and with trading as we get closer and closer to September, whenever the X date may be. I think sometime in June is partly an X date, somewhere between June and September. I can't remember exactly, but I don't know. That's one of the things I'm paying attention to. But look, vol surface overall, I mean, things are fairly low. I would say don't get lulled to sleep. The most interesting thing, again, as you highlighted, I work for Tasty, and we often are selling options. Obviously, right now, though, is not one of those times to sell options. I mean, vol is fairly low. We use what's called an IV rank, where you look past over the previous year to sort of compare where the vol is now compared to other times. It's very different from those who probably look at historical compared to implieds. That IV rank sort of factors all of that in, and you're seeing vols low across the board, and so you just kind of got to wait for that vol pop that may or may not come at some point in the next couple of months.
As our original co-host on this show said over a decade ago, his tagline was, options should be sold or not sold. And this would be an environment where he would probably be not selling out there right now. Of course, people are certainly trading up the futures. I mentioned last month that it was a historic month for options volume. We've been talking for a while here on this network. Can we possibly see a 1 billion contract month sometime soon? Well, we did see it last month, listeners. 1.1 billion contracts, just a ridiculous amount of volume. But also very interesting along those lines, one thing we've been talking about on this show for a long time, certainly since the onset of the pandemic, is, VIX futures volume can't catch a bid. No one seems to want to touch these things. Even bringing back things like SVIX and other things couldn't really gin up any volume. But that was not the case last month. Everything was up, including VIX futures. I guess all it took was a bank run to drive up the volume, because VIX futures volume up 35% from March of 2022. Obviously, you're starting from a lower baseline there, but still, it's been a while since we've seen that kind of pop in the vol future. So maybe a sign that there is a spark of life, dare I say it, a spark of hope out there in the vol futures at the end of the day. Kevin, did you notice that? I mean, it's hard to not notice the explosion of volume last month, right, across the board. But did you notice in particular that explosion of vol futures going up last month? And then what else is catching your eye out there in the vol surface this week?
Well, to answer the first question, I work for an exchange, and we're most certainly privy to what's going on across the industry in terms of volume. I think there are seismic changes that have occurred in our industry over the past couple of years, and it's great to see volume numbers remain this strong and set records. I think Jermal said it well in terms of the steepness of the contango. Looking back, though, I think a pickup in VIX futures is not that surprising because there's more opportunity to position in kind of the roll down or roll up, depending on your view of forward volatility in an environment where you have $2 or $2.10 between month one and month two. And that's with essentially a full month in front of us. So I am used to being interested in the month one, month two spread if it gets wider than $2, and that's more typical like in the last week of trade. To see it with a full cycle ahead of us is particularly interesting. So I think given the shift in the term structure, the steepness, that there's greater opportunity to spread that risk out there now. And I think sophisticated market participants are back and doing it.
Mr. Meatball, same question for you, sir. What's catching your eye out there in the vol surface this week?
Well, I think Kevin and Jermal hit the nail on the head. That the part that I think is a little interesting is the spread between the cash index and that front month future. It's right now about 2.6. That is, the VIX is 17, and that front month future is 19.6. Now we've got the weekend coming in, so there's a little weekend effect, but that spread is unusually wide. And when we see this spread get too wide, that's typically the vol traders, who are the smart guys in the room, telling the index option guys that maybe implied volatility's gotten a little too cheap and you're over your skis. And that can typically lead to some sort of, not game changing self, but it usually leads to some sort of selling in the overall market.
Before we get rolling into the VIX options, Jermal, you were mentioning earlier, and we were just talking, of course, about the volume records from last month. A lot of people are pointing the fingers on the options side to this explosion of zero-day paper going up in a lot of the indices. I'm not sure if you've noticed it, Jermal. It's been all the rage these days. I'm curious, where do you guys over there at Tasty, where do you fall on this zero-day explosion? Are you fans? Are you into it? You think it's nothing but nonsense gambling? Or where do you guys fall?
You know what? I just fell in love with the show. I just fell in love with the show, Mark, because I was thinking about this, and you clearly read my mind somehow or another.
It's
through the screen.
Hosting juices. I've been doing this for a while.
No doubt. As Kevin may have told you, I watch a lot of stuff, and this comes from just the background of working at a prop trading firm, right? You watch everything, and it's funny you mention this because, for the most part, we talk to people about trading mostly 45-day options, right? That's kind of the sweet spot that our research has found for selling vol, and then kind of closing out at 21 and rolling to the next expiration. So this zero-day option thing is fairly, new hat to Tasty traders. And even our main people, they know about it, but they really weren't into the idea. However, we have done a lot of research on it. I really haven't noticed many conclusions. How can you come to conclusion with something that starts, basically one? It's hard to do that. I really believe. To be totally honest, I actually refer back to somebody that Kevin and I looked at as a mentor, Eric Freight, who often said about options, they're really financial engineering materials. And I really believe that. But when you're talking about zero day, that's just gambling. To be totally honest, I really believe that. However, it doesn't mean you can't make money. And it doesn't mean, obviously, you can lose money. And they're obviously tradable. I trade them every now and again myself. But I think for the most part, it's kind of put call parity. And nobody really knows what's going on. If I buy, a 50 delta option in any given thing right now, there's no telling what's going to happen. I don't have any. It's not like I'm trading. I don't feel like that's trading vol. I feel like that's a situation of you're sort of trading a direction. And I'm all for that, to be honest. But I'm bringing this up because I think you guys know as well as I do, we got a new vol product coming out, right? I think there's a one-day VIX coming out. And so I'm really interested to see what's about to happen with that. I'm curious to know.
It does gel very well with this zero-day explosion. Our chat, savvy as always, getting to it before us. Options Queen asks, do you have any thoughts on the one-day VIX that SIBO is making available starting Monday? Yeah, good question, Options Queen. We got so excited in all the weeds of everything else. We kind of buried the lead that, SIBO kind of playing catch-up to the zero-day game now. They decided everyone's slinging all this 0-day SPX, we might as well have a vol measure to go along with it. Yes, 1-day VIX coming. I believe it's starting on Monday. So it's interesting. If you had asked me back in the day when SIBO was first launching these products, would we ever see a 1-day VIX, I would have laughed you out the door. But if you asked me a year or two ago, would we see this explosion of same-day SPX trading, I probably would have laughed you out the door about that as well. So again, it just shows you the rapid pace of evolution in the options and indeed volatility space. Let's go around the horn. Mr. Meatball, we'll start with you, sir. What are your thoughts on this impending 1-day VIX?
Not surprised. I think it makes sense. The measures of the VIX itself, I think, have changed. 2022 was the first year since they listed VIX futures that the VIX itself went down on rallies more than it went up on sell-offs. And I think part of that is akin to zero DTE stepping in and people using these options to manage risk on an intraday basis. So having an index that tracks where the vol is here, I don't know how useful it is, but it makes some sense. I don't think that's going to turn into a tradable product by any means. I don't know how you would trade dailies on volatility when, I don't know how you trade dailies on implied volatility of daily options. So I don't know that that's gonna be anything, but it'll be worth paying attention to. I think it'll give us some glimpses into when there's some market event type of risk that's approaching us, and it could bring some more clarity and some more detail, and more information is always helpful.
Think about what you said, that sentence right there. Dailies on the implied volatility of daily options.
I know.
That's what we're talking about now. Where has the options market gone? Mr. Kevin, that's the obvious question. That's the elephant in the room, right? What is the utility of this thing at the end of the day? Do you see any utility in it, sir?
I do. We just spent 5 or so minutes talking about the vol surface, and this is another indication of where markets are pricing that vol surface in the very near term. I think you could turn it around and say, to what extent do you care about the 1-year VIX? I do care about that too. To a certain extent, it's a function of, well, where is your option trading focused? And historically, option trading has been focused in like the front 2 months of the calendar. And so VIX is an indicative measure there. This is, like Mark and Jermal both sort of mentioned, it's going to be an interesting point, especially as we near events like a Fed day, or if we do get more clarity on when the Treasury is going to need to do outstanding things to avert a debt ceiling crisis. I do. Do I think there's going to be tradable product around it? SIBO would love that, but I doubt it. Trading essentially a third derivative product with a 1-day maturity sounds dangerous.
Jermal, you get the last word, sir. Are you all in on 1-day VIX, or are you a skeptic?
I like my cohorts here. I think it's going to be an interesting metric to look at. Sort of like how we look at 1-month paper for yields, right? I mean, I think it's another metric to sort of pay attention to and sort of get a complete picture of a vol surface. I think Kevin's spot on. It'll be really interesting with a day to go how you're looking at vol overall. So I think it'll have some utility.
I should mention SIBO actually a little bit late to the party. Other people have been putting out this kind of data for a while, including the creator of VOLQ, Mr. Scott Nations. He's been putting out a 1-day Voldex and a Voldex 0 DTE as a combo out there. So he's been doing some short dated metrics for a little while. So everyone, maybe I'm letting the cat out of the bag. It might be a good question of the week for next week, but are you a fan? Are you excited? Do you find utility in this 1-day VIX? I'm curious. Obviously our live chat is intrigued, but you folks are the hardest of hardcore. What about the rest of you out there? Are you intrigued by 1-day VIX? I'm curious. I want to hear your thoughts as we keep on rolling into the land of the vol options. And as Jermal mentioned earlier in the week, we saw some numbers out there from a VIX volume perspective. Today, it's actually looking respectable. And in fact, if you just dial the Wayback Machine back about a month and a half or so, maybe 2 months, the ADV was right around 500,000 contracts. So we're pretty much at that right now, pretty darn close. So that would look like a pretty banger day a couple of months ago. Of course, post-Fed kicking everything into high gear, this volume has changed. VIX ADV was threatening 1 million contracts a day at one point. So a little bit of a different scenario now, but still a respectable amount of paper here for a Friday when not a heck of a lot is going on at the end of the day. 487,000 contracts on the tape right now. The ADV, 720,000 contracts. That puts it down 36,000 from this time last week. So as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, that 900,000 level in VIX was unsustainable from an ADV level. And we are seeing that. It's starting to come off now, but it's still a respectable number, 720 out there. Nothing to sneeze at the end of the day. Let's go down really quickly. Look at the top positions. What's open for size in VIX options right now, listeners? Let's find out. By the way, we're hanging out right now. Only one puts in the top 10. So we're just blowing through downside all the time. No puts left to speak of. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe folks are taking their puts off and they're going off to buy their private islands. Either way, 9 calls, 1 put in the top 10. And you don't have to go far to find that put. It's right there at number 10, 141,000 of the June 15 puts. And then that's it. All calls all the time for the rest of our top 10 this week, listeners. Number 9, 143,000 of the May 32s. Number 8, $1.46 of the June 23 calls. Number 7, 170,000 of the May 25. So far, we're seeing, dare I say it, relatively normal strikes. Maybe the days of the pars and the 115s and the 95s and all that fun. Maybe that's behind us. I don't know. We shall see. Number 6, 195,000 of the SEP 25s. Number 5, $1.96 of the May 24s. Number 4, our old friend, about 250,000 of the May 50s. Is this 50 Cent? Is he still lurking on the 50 strike? I guess we'll have to wait to find out. Number 3, 263,000 of the May 30s. And then number 2, number 1, you know what they are. They've been out there for a while, listeners. It's that June 30-40 vertical. 430,000 of the 40s are open. And number 1, almost 500,000, 498,000 of the June 30 calls out there. Jermal, before I break down the week's worth of action, we had a pretty intense week out there from a VIX options perspective. How close attention do you pay to VIX options flow and anything catching your eye out there this week, sir?
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. I used to look a lot. I mean, a whole lot, like every single day. And and I haven't in a while.
I'm guessing that was back in your SIBO days, maybe?
It was 100% back then. And honestly, even a little bit for the first year and a half being at Tasty. But and I think a lot of it is just based off of always expecting some type of pop. But I was really intrigued right now hearing what you just listed off, because it is interesting. You didn't hear any of the 75 or the 85 or the par calls or anything like that. And I think that's attributed to just where we are right now, and as far as where volatility is, and as far as people's expectations of anything crazy happening. So I find that really interesting. I mean, even the dealers are kind of like, these aren't happening. So we're trading anything near term, and that's kind of fascinating to see. But yeah, I really haven't looked at much volume more recently, and I guess I really haven't been drawn to, because again of where volatility is. I mean, things are fairly calm, so I'm just chilling.
VIX options are just chilling, at least for what we're looking at right now. Certainly compared to the heady days of last year when it was all 110s and 120s and all sorts of madness was going up last year. A much more comparatively normal year. By the way, and let's clarify, I see a lot of chatter in the chat about, is this VIX one day tradable? No, it's not tradable. It's just one of these many indexes they put out there just to watch and track. Just an index for watching right now. No tradable product that I've seen anywhere announced in the near future. We were just joking about that earlier. A one-day VIX on one-day options. That would certainly be, shall we say, interesting, but I don't think any plans for that right now. I will be going down to OIC next week, so I'll be chatting with all the various exchange folks out there, so maybe I'll get more clarity on what the plan is for that. But right now, I don't see any plans to make that tradable. Let's get to the big VIX mothership out here this week, see what's going on. Like we said, today, a decently active day, closing in on 500,000 contracts. The big dog today, we have the May 18 puts, about 28,000 of those, followed by 26,000 of the July 30s, followed by 25,000 for number 3 of the Aug 30s. So similar size paper over there, maybe a roll. Number 4, 22,000 of the May 23s, and round out the top 5 today. On one of the lighter days of the week, actually, 20,000 of the Aug 60s. So there we go. A little bit of that fun upside sneaking in there. Yesterday, a little bit more paper on the tape, 736,000 contracts. The big dog yesterday, 53,000 of the SEP 30s. Once again, that 30 strike holding a lot of fascination for people out there these days. I certainly understand that. It's a psychologically important level. Number 2, 41, almost 42,000 of the May 22s. Number 3, 39,000 of the Sep 25s. Number 4, 29,000 of the June 16 puts. And rounding out the top 5 yesterday, 25,000 of the May 16 puts. Maybe a little bit of roll/time spread action there as well. Now we get into the beefier days of the week, listeners. 2 days. Over 1 million contracts this week. Wednesday, the big dog this week, 1.31 million contracts. That is nothing to sneeze at. The big dog on Wednesday, listeners, almost 100,000 exactly. 100,004 to be precise of the June 26 calls. Followed by number 2, 58,000 of the June 23s. Number 3, 53,000 of the May 19 puts. Number 4, 46,000 of the June 21 puts. And rounding out the top 5 on the busiest day of the week, 41,000 of the May 22s. Out to Tuesday, no slouch itself, 1.18 million contracts on Tuesday as well. And once again, the big dog almost exactly 100,000. This time it was the Sep 25s. So intriguing paper on those 2 busy days, listeners. Followed by number 2, 65,000 of the April 17s. Number 3, 53,000 of the May 20s. Number 4, 52,000 of the Sep 23s. And rounding out the top 5 on a pretty busy day, 51,000 of the Sep 23s. Then we go to Monday. No slouch either. 746,000 contracts on the tape. The big dog on Monday, almost 47,000 of the April 18 puts, followed by 46,000 as well of the April 17 puts. For number 2, obviously a bit of a vertical going up there. Number 3, 29,000 of the May 30s. Number 4, 28,000 of the May 20s. And rounding out the top 5, a lot of 20 love out here this week. And number 5 on Monday, 24,000 of the April 20 puts. Mr. Meatball, we had kind of a weird week from a markets perspective. We started most days selling off and then turning around and rallying. Also an interesting week from a volume perspective where it's been pretty steady to heavy all week, including that really big tsunami of paper on Tuesday and Wednesday. What caught your eye out there in VIX options this week, sir?
Yeah, at the end of the day, a delta neutral trade on Tuesday. They did 100,000 of the 25 calls tied to futures on a 51 delta. It was a bit, and that's really what I think kickstarted VVIX kind of popping, because then the next day we had traders jumping in to still in September and some in June buying the 25s, buying the 30s, putting on call spreads, lots and lots of bull volume on Tuesday and Wednesday, a little bit of follow through on Thursdays, busier, but not as busy as Tuesday and Wednesday. So I was kind of surprised that, we've got this year low for VIX and all they want to do is jump in and buy calls. We're not seeing kind of the activity you might expect in puts for VIX right now. And that is, a little surprising to me that they're not just jumping all over it. I'm looking at May. You got some buyers of vol is up in VIX right now for May. When I'm looking at it, my theoreticals are the bids are all through my theoreticals. I updated my vols yesterday, so VVIX is reading down, but there's a bid for options in May, in June, and July. I'm not sure how VVIX is reading down when all of my vol metrics are up right now. So there's something. This market feels real heavy. Like I said, I don't know that we're going to get some sort of insane sell-off, but it definitely feels like we're something's going on because things are just really weighty.
Does have
a technical term.
Does have a weighty feel to it. I certainly concur with you there. Mr. Kevin, I know you're not day-to-day in the weeds of VIX options, but I know you've been watching with great joy and anticipation all of Mr. Rhodes, Mr. Once and Future Dr. VIX ongoing saga with the question he got in our pro Q&A. I believe it was back in December of last year about how he would prepare for an upside spike in VIX over the next 6 months. It's led to this lengthy saga on his Substack of adjusting and rolling. It sounds like you've been following along like a gripping telenovela, Kevin.
That's exactly. It's just like something.
When I think Russell, I think just pure telenovela.
I have been following along. If your audience doesn't follow along, I would recommend that you sign up and receive his Substack. I appreciate him filling in last week in my absence. And yes, I think the desire for a long volatility position that carries cheaply. So what I mean by that is that you're not just paying like downside option decay in an index. And that typically takes the form of structured volatility trades. So the specifics here, like short a put spread versus long a call or long a call spread. Sometimes you see that take the ratio form. And Russell put out a new piece on Monday about his rolling. He highlights his appearance on the show last week. And he moved out in this tracker out to May options from April. And I continue to be tuning in to my telenovela Davitt. I don't know how that translates, but I'll have to figure that out by next week.
Which you can find on VIX.com, the Spanish language streaming service. There you go. It all ties together here at the end of the day. We've been having a lot of fun on the show, listeners. We're already starting to come against it here. So I'm going to try to condense some of these vol ETPs here so we can get some time for the crystal ball and all the fun at the end of the show. SVIX, when we kicked off the show, at about an 1860, up about 3/4, actually about 0.8 out there, so a little bit more than that out there. SVIX, of course, our inverse friend out there, so up a little bit more now, up about 0.9 or so as the show has gone on. We've been waiting for that day where we're going to see a ton of SVIX volume. Today is not that day, listeners. Only 233 contracts on the tape. I wish it was 233,000. Only 233 contracts on the tape. The ADV is back below 1,000, dropping down another 300 or so contracts. So even though we saw a lot of paper going up in VIX this week, for whatever reason, SVIX can't catch a break. The top position out there right now is just 1,500 of the May 8 puts. So that'd be interesting, what it would take to get SVIX back down to 8. Intriguing stuff nonetheless. Let's keep rolling out to its sibling product, UVIX, at about a 12, down about 1.5 points from where it was this time last week. Actually putting up a little bit of paper, a little over 7,000 contracts. That's good because the ADV is back down to 6,000, moving in the wrong direction, down about 600 contracts. So today, maybe bucking that trend a little bit. The big dog out in UVIX right now, 1,300 of the April 13s. Those are going the way of the dodo today, so we'll have some new positioning to look forward to in UVIX this time next week. And, of course, UVXY, what is there left to say about this thing? It continues to move inexorably towards zero. 380 when we kicked off the show, down about 1/3 of a point. There were rumors. The Rock Lobster was all over me earlier this week. It's gonna reverse split 10 for 1. Does seem like those have been debunked. They seem content to let this thing just drift all the way to zero at this point. I don't know what they're doing. 65,000 contracts on the tape. That's a far cry from its ADV, which is 204,000 contracts, which in and of itself is down 43,000 contracts. I mean, look at these volume numbers. If that's not screaming at you, reverse split this thing, I don't know what is. But not a lot of love out there. 44,000 of the April 4 calls. That is the big dog position out there right now. Those are close, but looking like no cigar as we're hanging out again at about 380 right now. And let's bring up the rear here really quickly. VXX, 39.5 when we kicked off the show, down about 2 points from where it was this time last week. So again, I've said before, these movements in VXX are substantial enough, thanks again to their reverse split, hint, UVXY, that it does make me start to want to consider this thing again, which I hate myself for, but c'est la vie. Small money in this thing, listeners. Don't put a lot of money in VXX. We've all learned from that. 33,000 contracts on the tape today. The ADV, 37,000. That's hanging out at unch. So VXX could use a little bit of a boost from a volume perspective as well. The big position out there right now, 28,000 of the April 43 puts. All right, Jermal, I just went through a whole rundown of all the various VIX ETPs out there. First off, how much attention do you pay to this space? And then B, which of any of these products do you watch out there, sir?
So the big thing for me is liquidity always. And VXX is one I probably watch the most out of all of them. I also like the ability to have multiple strikes. Little hard to do when you're like UVXY and you're under 5. So
you don't like the 380? That doesn't float your boat, the 380s?
Yeah, no. Nah. And we know how these things work, right? Like UVXY, we would need some serious volatility to get this thing just to even double, let alone do more than that. So it's not as much of an interest. But VXX is definitely one I keep an eye on from time to time. I remember when that was just pretty recently when SVIX and UVIX came out. But it's obviously been really interesting couple of years, right? We all know that how these things have really changed and evolved over time. I believe there's another one coming out, ZIVB.
Yeah, ZIVB came listed yet on yesterday. I want to say they listed ZIVB.
Yeah, I think it was Wednesday. I think I'm actually about to talk about my show today with a buddy.
Yeah, it'll be fun to talk about.
Yeah, so I mean, VXX is probably the main one to watch right now. And again, I mean, what do you want to do here? You know what I mean? Like that's really kind of how it is. I mean, I do start to get a little bit more interested when VIX gets around 16, but who knows what's stopping it from here? So we'll see.
Mr. Meatball, same question for you, sir. What's catching your eye out there in the vol ETPs? And are you excited about this ZIVB, sir?
I think it's an interesting product. It replaces, old ZIV they delisted. ZIVB kind of replaces that.
Catch our listeners up really quickly. What is it? What are we talking about?
It is the VIX Futures short inverse mid-term ETF. So it is managing a an inverse portfolio of options or of short futures from months, I believe, 4 through 7. And managing those, rolling those, and so it's an inverse of what is it? VXZ? Is that the long version? And it's definitely if you're a short vol player, but you don't want to have to deal with the potential for 90% drawdowns. It's an interesting little buy and hold for short vol people. Certainly one worth kind of jumping into when we're at periods of sustained high volatility. That can be a fun one to trade in if you just want to sit and wait it out and you don't want to worry about kind of huge P&L swings like you'd see in something like SVIX.
All right, listeners, we are coming up against it really quickly. If you're paying attention to earnings season, who isn't right now, and you want all the latest data, you know where to go, theoptionsinsider.com. Click on the Options News and Articles tab. We have waiting for you, because we like you, all completely for free, the earnings season, earnings trades, earnings move, and earnings move results reports. 4 reports for you. Count them over there from our friends over there at Orats. And it really is some of the best data when it comes to earnings volatility analysis. And there were a lot of names popping off this week. Charles Schwab, IBM, a little car company called Tesla. You may have heard of it. All sorts of fun going on this week. So we have it all broken down for you again. It is fun to be back in the teeth of earnings season. It's always exciting. It's always driving a lot of paper. Always grist for the mill for a lot of discussion, especially for people who are tired of the will they, won't they dance of the Fed and how everything bakes back into the Fed at the end of the day. Earnings season, nice and micro, nice and discreet. You can look at a single name. You can crunch some numbers. You could do some math. You could do some trading and have a good old time at the end of the day. So theoptionsinsider.com, click on the Options News and Articles tab. Right now, with only 38 names reporting, we are still early in the season, listeners. We're hanging out at a whopping 149%. Obviously, 100% is if every name returned their straddle exactly. $1.50, that's pretty rich. We're not going to stay there. Don't worry. More names will report, and that will bring that down. Right now, our average is actually hanging out at a pretty impressive 96%. That's going back since pre-pandemic, listeners. We've been crunching these numbers for you. That's actually back up. During the pandemic, you got annihilated. And so getting back close to even, back to 100%, actually pretty impressive. So we'll see how this cycle works out. We'll also see if all of our vol prognostications are impressive. Jermal, I hope they prepared you, because now is the time where things get interesting and, dare I say it, dangerous. It is time for the crystal ball.
It's time to peer into the future and reveal what the volatility gods hold in store. It's time to look into the crystal ball.
All right, everybody, welcome to the crystal ball. This is the portion of the show where we attempt to wrestle with those slippery volatility gods, see what they hold in store for us for the coming week. And last week, we were pretty close, but no cigar. I was at a 19, a little north of that, 1905. I think that's because, that's right, I liked more of an 18.5 level, but Russell got there first ahead of me. So I bumped myself up to be a nice host. So no joy for me there. 24.25 on VOLQ. VOLQ at about a 1960 as we're wrapping up the show, listeners. VIX hanging out right around 1675. I forgot if it was you, Mr. Meatball, or Russ or Andrew. I'm sorry. I thought it was Andrew on the show with us last week.
It was Andrew on the show last week.
That's right. So we have you here for some reason, but it was Andrew. I could tell because it wasn't a palindromic prognostication. So that's how I could tell. So yes, it was Andrew. He was at a 17.25. So he's actually looking the best of all of us out here. He's about half a point away. Still no winner chicken dinner, but at least he's more respectable. 22.10 on VOLQ, so no joy there. And then we had Russell in the hot seat last week. He was at an 18.5, taking my spot. Not that it matters. We both would have been wrong. And VOLQ 23.25. I'm looking here. We got some of the live listeners here. Some of them were actually looking better than others. Options Queen, once again, looking the best. You should be running a vol book, Options Queen. If you're not, hit me up. I know some people. I'll put you in touch. So, yeah, you're closest by far. Our producers will go through all of the listener guesses. Remember, if you're listening after the fact, get your guesses in same day as the show, please. That's the only thing that's fair to everybody else. If you're within our 10th of a point margin of victory, fabulous prizes could be yours. All right, all the way around to saying no winners this week. So that means, Jermal, you get the dubious honor of going first. What are you feeling for VIX and VOLQ this time next week, sir?
Dubious indeed. Okay. I'm going to say, first I'm going to do just for S's and G's. I'm going to say that VIX is going to go up 10%. I know that everybody loves when you talk about how much percentage-wise VIX is going to go up.
Oh, you just enraged. You just enraged Mark Sebastian. He's going to hang up right now.
How dare you?
I'm going to say VIX will be, let's say, 18.35 next week. Some sort of sell-off towards the end of the week after earnings. The big earnings move, so much jostling around. It's going to cause VIX to pump up a little bit. And I'll say to some degree, VOLQ will pump up as well, but not quite as much. So let's go with, 20.75.
27.5 for VOLQ, 18.35 for VIX. All right, Kevin, you weren't on the show last week as well, so you get to go next. What are you feeling for VIX and VOLQ, sir?
I'm feeling like macro vol will continue to grind lower. It kind of pains me to say that. In the teeth of earnings, you see some, or historically you tend to see some dispersion, but over the landscape, it evens out. I am targeting on VIX like the November lows from 2021. I'm going 15.5. And VOLQ.
Dang.
Yeah, I know. I know, guys. VOLQ side in a similar vein, I'm going 16.25. Yep.
Wow. That spread's
Yeah.
crushing too then. Wow. Okay. Interesting, Mr. Kev. All right, Mr. Meatball. Also, I'm the only person who was on the show last week, so I get to go last. You get to go next, Mr. Meatball. What are you feeling for this time next week?
Al, I think Kevin is not wrong. I think we're looking at heading back to 12 for VIX.
But not by next week, I hope.
Not by next week. Not by next week. But, I want to pose this question to the guys, but something to think about involving 0 DTE and 12 VIX. What scenario sets up with a 12 VIX and 0 DTE options that is extremely dangerous? I want our listeners to kind of think about that for the week. And I will tell you that VIX is going lower. Kevin is wrong. Or no, Kevin's right. Jamal's wrong. VIX is going lower.
What percentage lower, Mark?
I know. I lost 10% of my love for Jamal when he was in percentage terms. I'm gonna give it the old. Let's see. Kevin did 15.50. I can't do 15.51.
This is right.
Just Carpa's market. All right. You know what? I'm gonna say we're gonna be lower, but maybe not as much. Or let's go for the gold. 14.41. 14.41. You're here first.
I said dang for Kevin's. I say double dang for yours. There's 14.41. My goodness. How much more blood can they squeeze from the stone? Apparently a lot more.
Mark, I got to tell you, I'm putting my money where my mouth is. Oh. I normally like to bet against my position, but I am loading up the truck on long-dated puts.
Well, if you're seeing VIX of 12 on the horizon, I can see why. What do you got for VOLQ, sir?
VOLQ, I'm going to go with an 1881.
81. All right, there we go. There's our palindromic nonsense for the week. I'll go last. I already wrote mine in the interest of time, listeners. I was thinking, I see the argument for low. I'm not sure if I see 1441 low, or let alone 15.5. I could see maybe a little bit of injection of juice, slight juice this time next week. I'm going to say 17.25 for VIX and 1935 for VOLQ. All right, listeners, we've been gassing on about all things vol. Who can blame us? A lot of things to talk about here. Long show today, but a fun one. Before we go, listeners, let's go around the horn. Jermal as our guest. If folks want to check out everything you got cooking over there, where should they go? What should they do?
Twitter is probably the easiest way. At Jermal Chandler. I'm the only one, luckily. At JermalChandler, all together. And, of course, you could also email me at any given time. My email is Jermal, Jermal, at tastylive.com. It's a play on, obviously, we have Tasty Trade, but we're on the Tasty Live show. So that's how it is. Those are the main two ways.
There you go. Of course, check out his shows over there at Tasty Live if you are so inclined throughout the week as well. And Mr. Kevin, where should they go to check out all of your great content, sir?
I have an author page on Nasdaq's site, and Mark or anybody else listening, you could run across me at the OCC conference in Nashville next week, where I'll be talking to you in person.
Yes, the rumor has it I'll be seeing you in person. Mr. Meatball, you're out of the loop. No in person for you. Not going to Nashville next week, sir.
I am not going to Nashville next week. I'm going to be in Chicago the following week doing it live with you.
That's true.
Maybe we'll have Kevin come out.
I'll see you in 2 weeks. So it's just I'll see Henry next week.
Bring your cake, Mark. Bring the cake.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's right. I owe you some cake.
You got to do some bacon in the next couple of weeks, sir.
I got to make it at my mom's house on Monday.
You got to go to Tootsie's. That's all I'm going to say.
Mr. Meatball, if folks want to hit you up for vol tips or perhaps baking tips, where should they go? What should they do?
Well, I think before we get there, I need to know what shape cake Kevin wants me to bake him. Does he want an armadillo like I made for Lauren? Does he want a, what shape cake?
He seems like a heart-shaped cake kind of guy. Maybe red velvet heart-shaped.
Make it a term structure chart.
Ooh, that I can do.
That would be awesome. Right. If it has to match up,
term
though.
Structure cake.
It has to match up exactly.
Bulb views.
Kevin's going to measure it, and if it's not exactly the slope of the term structure, he's going to throw it in your face. I like that. I'm in for that. I want to see that.
Go to optionpit.com. I'm writing a daily blog on VIX and volatility. And you're going to want to read that because I think it'll help you trade and help make you some money.
There you go. Check them out. Optionpit.com. That is going to do it for us on the on-demand side this week. I want to thank all of you folks who joined us throughout the week. A ton of content coming your way. I will be traveling next week to the options industry conference, but don't worry, all your usual array of content is coming at you. And because we like you, pro folks, I should say, you want to stay tuned because we got a double dose of pro content coming at you after this show. Of course, Options Oddities at his usual time. And if you're listening to that show, you can't find one thing to trade out there, at least make you scratch your chin and say, you're doing it wrong. It's an unheralded gem on the pro side, but it's a fun one nonetheless. And then after that, immediately after that, because we like you folks, another pro Q&A session. That's 2 for this week because we like you folks, with Mr. Eric Kovalak talking about all things crypto. Should be fun. So a lot of fun there. If you're not on the pro side yet, you know where to go. TheOptionsInsider.com/pro is the place to go. Stay tuned. VolView's schedule may be a little bit in flux next week because I want to do it live with Kevin, and I believe he's traveling on Friday. So we'll see where we can make something work. Might be an earlier show next week, maybe on Thursday. Maybe we'll mix it up. We'll see. So stay tuned to our live schedule to know when VolViews is coming. But in any event, we'll see you next week, another episode of Volatility Views. Stay safe out there, everybody.
Volatility Views is brought to you by Nasdaq. From its inception, Nasdaq has been an innovator and agent of change in the financial markets. It's in our DNA. From the development of electronic trading to our drive to bring enhanced functionality and world-leading technology to our suite of 6 options exchanges, we aim to exemplify customer focus, consistent technology, and streamlined solutions. In 2019, Nasdaq proudly launched the Nasdaq 100 Volatility Index, ticker symbol VOLQ, to its suite of exchange indexes. The VOLQ index uses only at-the-money options, offering the investment world a measure of volatility that directly points to the Nasdaq 100. Since then, CME launched VOLQ Futures, VLQ, and we've launched Nasdaq 100 Volatility Index Options, ticker symbol VOLQ. which are AM-settled index options on the VOLQ index that provide investors with a new way to gauge forward-looking equity market swings. Learn more about these exciting new volatility products at www.nasdaq.com/VLOQ. You can find more on Nasdaq's full suite of index options products at www.nasdaq-100-options-NQX-NDX-VOLQ. Nasdaq, leading the U.S. options market and continually rewriting tomorrow. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.